So I have an exercise for you, Dan. My name is Kirk Ross. I'm 37 years old. I've still got 3 years of eligibility left at the college level. I'm about 6'3", 250 pounds. I haven't bench pressed in probably 4 years. And I probably run about a 5'6" at this point. Maybe. Give me some advice. I come to you. Hey, listen, man, I'm interested in going to a university. What do you got for me, Dan?
Why? My first thing is why?
For the chicks, man.
Okay, for the chicks. Here's the deal. You go and you walk on at Florida State, and they've got all sorts of beaches down there. I mean, those are the things. I have to return families and prospects questions with a question.
It's a mess in this attic. Lot going on, but there ain't no need to panic. Come on up and join. We getting wild, getting manic. Spitting truth for all you fanatics. Every week got something new to say. Ain't no filter, this shit coming straight from the brain. It's coming straight from the brain. Yeah, it's coming straight from the brain.
All right, I'm here with Dan Fodrocy. Dan, it's been about 18 years or so, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while. It's been, like I said, 18 at least, and we both looked a little bit different back then, but here we are.
I don't know. You look pretty, man. You look pretty. You're a little smaller than you were back then. You're probably not quite as jacked.
You know, the funny thing about it is in all those years I was coaching and then here even now, I'm one of the few, I'm fortunate, I'm not going to lie, I'm one of the few people that was able to lose the weight from playing ball. You know, when you get into college playing football, especially, you got to put on weight just to make it. Right. And I used to tell people all the time, they'd be on recruiting visits or whatever, and they'd always think I played like quarterback or receiver. And I'm like, I actually played defensive end, played when I was like 40 pounds ago. So, yeah. You know, I've been one of the fortunate few, I'm not going to lie, but hey, I'm still there.
Put it this way, I've never been confused when people hear that I played at Saginaw, they assume I played tackle or something. So you're trending in the right direction, which is good.
Fair enough.
So the context, how I know Dan was a defensive end and a badass defensive end at Saginaw Valley when I came in as a freshman. He was leader of our defensive position. So I spent hours and hours with him every day in the fall and in the winter workouts and things. You're always an interesting guy, very intense athlete. That's the context. But here we are 18 years later. We haven't spoken in quite some time. Dan's starting a new business. He's been in business now for a couple years after a long career in coaching at the collegiate level. Dan, let's hear a little bit about your background, and then we'll dive into what you're up to these days.
Yeah, I mean, my background is you hit it. I played at Saginaw Valley, and I got done. I jumped right into coaching. I never did anything else. I finished up. Like I said, you came in. I think it was it my senior year you started, and I got done, and I jumped right into coaching. I was a graduate assistant at Grand Valley, the team that ended, my career. Which, no hard feelings, but I got an opportunity. I took it, and I ran with it. Me and my wife moved around the country a little bit, chasing coaching. I coached at primarily the Division II level. I spent 1 year at what's now called FCS, 1AA school. And,
nice.
About 2019, I got all the way up to being an offensive coordinator. And I tell people all the time, so I started a consulting business to work with recruiting. But I tell people all the time, my goal from the day I started working at Grand Valley was I wanted to be a head football coach. I didn't make any bones about it with my family or with people that really knew me. Right. So I get all the way up to be an offensive coordinator, kind of as you watch, TV or whatever, one step, next step is maybe to be a head coach if that opportunity comes up. And I got out of coaching, and it was not anything I wanted to do. It wasn't at all planned. I had zero intention of getting out of coaching. It was just where the chips fell. So we moved to Wisconsin. My wife got an opportunity. We felt like it was the best for the four of us. Yeah. And it's funny because you'd say I was an intense player. I'm the exact same way now. Like, I don't laugh very often. I don't really have any time for joking around or what. I mean, I will every once in a while.
Perfect podcast.
Yeah, great. So you're going to get a lot of great listeners. People are going to be super fired up to listen to my intense, straightforward stories. But anyways, my point is, I was like, all right, well, what am I going to do? I have 15 years of coaching college football experience. I have 5 years of playing. Outside of that, I don't know what else I can do. I have never done anything else. I've never been a physicist. I've never worked in math. I don't know anything about technology outside of what I did in coaching. So my skills are pretty limited. I'm like Napoleon Dynamite. It's hard to get a girlfriend without skills.
Girls only want boyfriends who have great skills.
So I'm like, all right, what am I going to do? It's going to be really difficult. So I was like, well, here's the deal. I can take what I did for the last 15 years and I can focus on the part that I think became really challenging. I started seeing a shift about in 2015, 16, and I was like, recruiting is getting like crazy, out of control, and awkward, and really kind of confusing for families mostly.
Yeah.
especially at the smaller levels, because they all see what's on TV, right? So everyone's watches TV, and I watch Alabama and Michigan, and we listen to 24/7 sports and Rivals, and it's like, okay, that's how it works. I'm like, dude, it doesn't work like that at Saginaw Valley. It doesn't work like that at, Grand Valley, Arkansas, Monticello, even at North Dakota State didn't work like that. And I'm like, well, what if I can help some people in this process? So I started a consulting company, and again, kind of right down to who I am. I literally named it Athletic Recruiting, Education, and Navigation. And people laugh at me all the time, like, my goodness, that's a long name. I'm like, I'm a very to the point guy. I'm very serious. If you want to know what I do, read the business. I do call it AREN. Like you said, it's a company. I kind of abbreviate down to AREN once people get to know it.
Right.
But when I started AREN, it's literally about just guiding people through this madness of a process. And I just got off the phone with a family, not a family, but a dad of a young prospect, and talking to him about what's important for him. But here's the thing, for Johnny or Jill, it's different. For Joey and Billy, it's different. Each family is unique. And that's what I saw happening, is people were lumping, like, okay, I watch ESPN and I listen to, Louis Riddick, and okay, this is what we'll just do. I'm like, well, yeah, for the top 2%, you could probably follow that and be all right. But the other 98% of the people get lost, and it gets very confusing. And, fundamentally, I really wanted to do it so that people knew what they were doing on the front end, and you are a better player, and you don't give up, and again, teach his own. There's no fault to anybody if it doesn't work out, or if you transfer or whatever. That's getting a lot right now. But the reality is, I just wanted to make sure that people were more prepared. And I thought I had a skill set that could help some people. And so far, I feel like I've been able to do that. And it's been crazy. Starting a business is complete madness. I had no idea what I was doing. I feel like I'm doing as best a job as I can. I got a lot to learn. So, and then around that, taking care of my 2 young kids, and trying to not drive my wife completely crazy, all those different things. It's a full-time job. I tell people all the time, I got to get back into coaching so I can get some free time. That's really what I got to do, to be honest.
I mean, I imagine at the offensive coordinator level, and really any collegiate coaching level, you're pretty active in the recruiting process. But the more I watch football, the more I see it as a game of chess, and the more I see it as really the coaches. It's the head coach level at that level. It's basically managing people. Right. I mean, it's you're very far away from the actual hands-on coaching in most cases. So do you feel like, is that still an aspiration of yours that you want to end up at that level, or?
No, I know coaching's out. I'm done coaching. And I'll be completely frank with you. I don't know, maybe things will change in 10, 15 years, but I'm really discouraged by the direction of coaching, and I don't want to turn this podcast to people like, oh my God, this guy's a complete maniac. But like, I think football is in a really bad spot. My opinion. I don't speak for everybody else. I don't speak for ESPN. I don't speak for anybody else, but we've taken, especially college football, and we have completely messed the whole thing up, and it's
with the transfer portal and all of that.
Okay. It's not just that though. It fundamentally comes down, and again, I'm super serious. So if you want to like tell some jokes and stuff.
No, dude,
you gotta do what you gotta do.
No, wait, Dan, let me explain one thing. The thing that binds all the people that I've had on the show is that they're passionate. So you're a passionate guy. When I knew you, I can see it still there. That's all I really want from you. So just be yourself. It's awesome, dude. The problem
with football, and again, I can kind of filter this down. If you really look at it, the problem with football is money. Okay. The biggest problem in football, and especially, NFL, I'm not going to touch on the NFL. I think they have their market and they're fit perfectly. Yeah. It's money driven. It should be money driven. And that's all that should matter. I cannot stand that element in college football. College football taught me a lot that I take to today. I would not have continued this business had I not went through college football and went through the ups and downs we went through of winning, not winning all the time. We didn't win the national title when I was there. And all those things that we learned, people like poo-poo now. And it's all like Alabama or bust. People like give Michigan a hard time because they got pounded by Georgia. Like, dude, Michigan was never in Georgia's category. Right. But the fact that they made the Final Four was awesome. They earned their way in there. They beat Ohio State. I think Ohio State was still the better team. That's clear. But the reality of the fact is Ohio State wasn't better that day. That is football, but we're trying to take that element away from the game, and it completely drives me bat crazy. Yeah. Okay. And we're doing that at every level. We're drifting this down to then high school and then down to youth sports. And I'm like, I'm not going to do it. So being a part of the game coaching is just, I don't fit that realm anymore. And frankly, as I was leaving, I felt like a square peg in a round hole because I believe in the game. And to be successful in the game right now, you kind of have to take yourself away from, you have to do what's best for you and the program and not necessarily what's best for the game.
Right.
And I can actually make a lot better impact right now in the game that I could ever do coaching, because coaching is about winning, keeping your job. And to do that and what's going on in the current climate, it's such a dynamic that I just don't really love. And just the money and what it's doing to, again, I'm just going to say that the people that it's drawing in because of the money, that's any avenue of life.
Yeah.
But like, if coaches weren't making $5, $6, $7, $8 million a year, there wouldn't be this influx of coaches. And it's not rocket science. People should earn their money, and everyone that makes their money is behooved to their money. I don't take anything away from Jeff Bezos and all these people that make all this money. They've earned it. I don't have any problem with people that have made a ton of money. But then what you see at the bottom floors and how money is driving people to want to get into college football as a player, like, I'm fundamentally against that. So like, these parents call me and they're like, what do I got to do to get my kid a full scholarship? I'm like, first of all, you stop saying that. You have zero chance to get a full scholarship based off of the stats if you want to be a data guy, if you have that mindset.
Right.
If you are a full scholarship guy, you're in the top 2% of football players in the country. And you can kind of do whatever you want. But the reality is people are going to be a lot like me.
Yeah.
An underdeveloped kid that's going to probably be
work his ass off to get there. Yeah. Yeah.
And see, the problem is, so that's what it fundamentally comes down to, is because of all the money, the media does not tell you that, and certainly not social media. And people, we're humans. We're not robots yet. Elon Musk hasn't gotten all these robots running the country yet. So people can be influenced. And I'm like, folks, you got to calm down. You got to slow down. And that's where I think I can make a big difference. And to this point, I feel like there's been some good response back that it has helped. But dude, football is scary. I'm really concerned. Now, it's not going to go away, but it's going to turn into the NFL. And I think what you're going to see, what I'm concerned about, is you're going to see the Division 2 is in a really tough spot where we played. Right. Schools like Saginaw Valley, schools out in the PSAC. I tell people that I work with all the time, I am super concerned if those schools are going to be functional in the next 10 years, because the models that we're creating are not anywhere involved in creating opportunities and giving kids like myself or yourself opportunities. It's about Alabama or bust. And you're even hearing that from the college coaches, like, they're so burned out right now from the portal. But that's not anybody's fault other than the adults that made these decisions, because they listened to society complain and whine and cry that these kids were being exploited. Then you opened up an entire Pandora's box, and now you're getting college coaches that are like, I'm out of this, like really good ones. And not because of reasons like me. It's not because, my wife had an opportunity. I said, hey, this is a good chance for you. There's a lot of coaches who are just leaving the profession because they don't enjoy it anymore. That is not the answer. No. You're seeing it at high school too. That is the wrong answer. Now, if you get out of it because like something happens with me and you get a job opportunity and you want to move your family, listen, whatever. If that's what Coach Saban wants to do, that's fine. Yeah. But when you start seeing good coaches that are calling me saying, Dan, I don't know if I want to do this anymore because, like, I don't know who's going to be on the team tomorrow. That's a problem. And like, we have to look back and say, you have to have some restrictions. Life is not about just Wild West. And if you read enough books, if you're a history savant like I am, and you read enough books, the Wild West wasn't great. People want to sit here and talk about, back in the day. Back in the day wasn't all that great, but we learned from it and make it better. But instead, we're learning from the past and making it worse. Yeah, and so the leadership portion that I try to talk about, like on my podcast, is more about like leadership. Like the NCAA I think is the right format, but they've been bullied around by university presidents, by society to just change at will because they're so afraid of people. And I'm like, what are we doing? And I had a podcast about the GLIAC. Like, the GLIAC is a complete hot mess because their leadership is really embarrassing, in my opinion. I did a podcast. Even did a follow-up with Marcus Thatcher, who doesn't even work there anymore, which I think tells you enough you need to know. That I just think the leadership's awful, and what they've done to one of the best leagues in the country is just a microcosm of what's going on. There's so little leadership. And you can listen, Kirk, sports, you can look at this from the top. Yeah. Our president, even the previous one and this one, complete debacle. The people running the Congress, hot mess. All the governors, awful. None of them could even talk to each other. And we expect kids, 10-year-old kids, to make the decision. So I jumped in to be at the front level with these kids to try to start sending them the right message, because they're not getting it from anywhere else. So that was the whole genesis of why I wanted to do something like this, because this is the only way to help the game. You are not helping the game as a coach, no offense. You're just keeping the canoe going. You're just kind of rowing in the same direction with what the current is. And I don't fault those guys or there's some, female coaches coaching. I don't fault any of those coaches. But the problem starts at the youth level and just the messaging. So, from a standpoint of what I do with AREN, I try to help with some messaging, and then some of my podcast stuff. No one listens to that stuff. I mean, you got 10 billion times more followers than I do. But
I'll put a link to it, though. What's the name of your podcast?
Yeah, fired up. It's called State of Play, and I talk about athletics and just kind of what's going on out there. And I generally try to give people the other side. So State of Play, you can find it right under my name on YouTube, and that'll be in the show notes out there too, folks, down in the bottom. Yeah, fired up.
So Dan, that's pretty impressive. So something that I was kind of suspecting out of your transition into this recruiting firm, or really this recruiting business, is that you learned some pitfalls, if you will, or you saw some hurdles, you identified it, and rather than complain about it, which is what so many freaking people do,
right?
It's my ultimate pet peeve. You decided to go do something about it. So I think that's really inspiring for people. If you see an issue, you're able to make a difference, and that's what you're going to be doing now to some extent, and that's your goal.
I mean, I do go back, and I like to consider myself a history savant. So I go back in time and I think about my experience. I think about, what I did as a coach and both as a player. And, I wasn't as talented as Johnny DeGiorgio, who was an NFL player that we played with. He was extremely talented and a hard worker too. Make no mistake. Yeah. I didn't have that same ability. I couldn't redirect the same way Johnny could. I couldn't snap on tackles the same way Johnny could. But the one thing I always felt, and no one has ever, kind of said this, it's just me guessing, I always wanted to kind of fight, if you know what I mean. Like, I wanted to be in the fight. Like, hey,
you're
listen,
aggressive.
Yes, you tell me to do something, like, I'm going to find a way to get this thing to be done. I don't probably have the talent to do it, but I'm going to figure it out. As I was finishing my last semester at Saginaw Valley, I was a student assistant working for Coach Ori in the strength and conditioning portion. And I used to tell those kids like Mike Bellina and those guys who were going to kind of take over, and Kirk Summers, who were going to take over my group, I was like, we would be in the lifting sessions and they would have to like hold like the bridge and stuff like that. And I would say, just find a way. What do you want me to tell you? Find a way. Don't stop. And that was kind of what I took away from my coaching, perspective that I wanted to apply to recruiting is like, listen, not everyone's as talented to go to Michigan or Michigan State, or even talented enough to go to Cato or Whitewater or whatever it may be, but we can find a way that fits what you're looking for. But then I go back. So here's kind of really the ultimate thing that I always think about when I think about AREN and making sure I keep myself in my core principles of what's important to me. Because there's a million different directions you can go this.
Of course.
If you want to be a recruiting guy and make a ton of money right now, you can do some things that I don't agree with and probably make a lot of money. Right. But I always go back to this. So my junior year, this is back in 1999. I was going into my junior year, going into my
high school.
In high school. Sorry. So going into my senior year of high school. So this would have been the summer of 2000. I want to make sure I'm kind of correct on my dates. Me and my dad went to one of these big showcases in Indiana. Back in those days, those were a little bit more freewheeling. Like guys, every level could come down. Michigan could have been there if they wanted to. Yeah. Indiana could have been there if they wanted to. So those were really new. They were super early in the process. Not a lot of people were doing those. Nowadays, everyone's doing them and they're robbing people left and right. But back then, you could have went there and, Central Michigan could have been in attendance. So this is a different day and age. So I go down there. Me and my dad drive all the way down to Indianapolis. And it was actually the night before prom of,
that's a big day.
Yeah, big day. Didn't make it to prom that year because I was going to try and earn a scholarship going into my senior year. So this is after junior year, And we go down there and they had, presented that there's going to be all these coaches in attendance. And I had been, again, hearing through the grapevine that coaches go to these comments. So we go there. There was one college coach in attendance. One. Anderson University. I'll never forget it. Anderson. So if you're interested, they were at least hard workers 20 years ago. Okay, I don't know what they do now. Anderson University was there. And I'll never forget, I got in the car and I had a pretty good combine. I put some good numbers. It didn't really benefit me at all because there's only one college there. And I get in the car with my dad. He was cool with it. Like, listen, you don't always know what you're going into. And my family had the ability to do that. So we get in the car and my dad says, what'd you think? I was like, well, I thought I did okay. Wasn't a lot of coaches there. He's like, I was up in the stands talking to another dad. And he's like, man, there ain't no coaches here. And I'll never forget that. That was something that stuck into my brain, my dad telling me, and that all comes down to value. And I just don't like families that maybe can't afford to get ripped off. Like my family could afford it. Like we could, listen, my dad and mom worked really hard. And at the time we could handle $100 for a trip or whatever. Some families,
that would break the bank.
Of money.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. And I don't listen. And people like give me a hard time. They're like, oh, you're challenging these showcases or whatever. I'm like, listen, for somebody, $100 may be an entire day's worth of work. Right. And we shouldn't sit here and minimize those people just because the world tells you that you should just break the bank and invest thousands and thousands of dollars in your son or daughter's, pre-college experience to try to earn an opportunity. Because then once that passes, nobody focuses on that anymore. And it really bothers me. Yeah. So I always thought about that. So I was like, here's the deal. I'm just going to make sure that these families know what they're getting into. Like, for instance, I am a third-party recruiting service. This is going to kind of sound, I guess, a little bit messed up, but I'm anti-third-party recruiting service if they're not upfront with you.
Right.
Like if they're honest and they're telling you what they can provide you and they can show you some examples. In some cases, I'm like, hey, let's, this might be a good opportunity for you. Right. But the problem is no one's upfront anymore. And it's a fault of society. I mean, everyone's just trying to make a buck, so I get it. Because if you are upfront, as I've learned, a lot of times people will not embrace your opportunity.
People like to hear pleasant lies more than they like to hear hard truths, sometimes.
And I'm really uncomfortable with that based off my 20 years of being in it. Now, I'm not in it anymore. And it's changed very quickly. Like, I've been out for 2 seasons now. So it's not quite 2 full years, but 2 seasons. And as my friends still tell me, a lot has changed. A lot's changing very quickly. So I don't have the inside knowledge, but I go back to those 20 years and I just say, if I can help one family, then that's worth it. So I just, when I kind of see something wrong with the game, and that was how I played, that was how I coached, like, you don't disrespect the game just because it might behoove you. And too many people think it's, about me, and that's fine. And you could have that philosophy, but I'm not going to,
right.
And I've actually even turned some families down. I mean, if it doesn't fit with what I'm doing, I did that once. First, I think 3 months, I was just begging for people to, take on my services. I mean, I wanted to start something, and I took somebody on, and they were totally cool about it, but they wanted me to go a little different angle, and it didn't really work out. And they were cool with it. They were like, "Hey, you tried your best." I was uncomfortable with it.
Yeah.
And I have now since told people, "Hey, listen, I'm not what you're looking for. Now, if you want me to give you direction of who to look for this, I can maybe point you to some people. I'll also tell you kind of what's wrong with it, but I work primarily with high schools now. I have a few select families that I represent and just kind of give that educational piece. But really, I represent high schools and their high school coaches.
Okay, so an entire program. So any talent, any like kids that are interested or have the talent to move on, they would fall under your wing. Although they would have the ability to hire a separate third-party recruiter if they wanted.
Listen, my big approach is talking to high school coaches, letting them know, make sure that you know what the process is and what's important. And I hope to actually, now my transitioning of this year has been really focusing on high schools and entire programs.
That's cool.
Because I see a lot of coaches getting burned out by the recruiting process, and I want to keep them in it. I tell them all the time, let me take a lot of that. Yeah. I should never take 100% of a coach's recruiting responsibility, because the college coaches are still going to stop in the schools. They're still going to come and talk to them. They're going to call them. And fundamentally, that's how I want it to be done anyways, because that's how it's the best, in my opinion. That creates good communication, good relationships. But when you kind of boil it down, these coaches shouldn't be fielding some of the calls that I end up taking from them. I love talking to people about certain things, but leave your coach alone. Let him work on the X's and O's. Let him or her work on making you a better person. And I'll focus on telling you what's right or wrong in the recruiting process, what camps are best to go to, different things that you can do that are worth your time or not. Leave your high school coach has got enough between the fact that they're probably not only your coach, they're probably a teacher in the high school,
as well,
administrator. Leave them alone. But the recruiting part is really important. So I'm trying to jump in and help them. And it's been what I feel is successful, because I think we've been making some good impacts on families. And ultimately, that's what it comes down to. But it's a challenging market, because it is dog eat dog out there, because everybody's trying to get their paws. And here's the thing, what it comes down to. And I got into no one ever responds, but I make the argument. I got into a thing, I think it was last summer, regarding Coach Franklin at Penn State said, do not hire a recruiting service. I'm like, first of all, here's the deal. It's not Coach Franklin's job to tell you how to navigate your life, because he is in the business. That would be like a doctor saying, hey, if you got a surgery, don't go consult your local physician. Only come to me.
Right. It gives him more control. Yeah, it gives him more control. Right.
So I am pretty critical of the college coaches, because I do think in a lot of ways, Kirk, they have created and they've seized this power that they understand. And that's why you do see some players or some coaches coming down from the NFL to college, because they do have a little bit more level of power.
Oh, yeah.
Because of the control over a younger kid.
Yeah.
And they don't want to lose that.
Right, right.
But you're now starting to see them go back. You're starting to see some of these college coaches saying, hey, this isn't any better. I might as well at least go up there and coach the best players on earth. Right. So you're starting to see this really weird dynamic where coaches are being held accountable by the transfer portal. So I, in a lot of ways, have no problem with the transfer portal. It's getting out of hand from a guidance standpoint, though. Okay. Like I'll use Caleb Williams as an example. He's the hot name right now, the kid that left Oklahoma. That's fine. He can leave, and he wants to go play for Coach Riley at USC. He's got one free transfer. Fine. Have at it. But Caleb Williams should not dictate the decision for a kid at another program. Right. And there's too much of that going on. It's like, well, hey, look, he's doing it. He's going to go do this. So that'll happen to you too. The numbers are starting to get into the 12 and 1300s that are in the Division I transfer portal. about 29% of them. So you just do the math on that. You're better at math than I am. So you do that math real quick. How many that have actually landed spots? Well, about 400 of those 1,300 have landed at spots. So you're talking about 900 kids are just sitting out there waiting. And ESPN and 24/7 and Rivals will never report on those kids that don't land because it doesn't help them. And I don't fault them for that. But the reality is
that's going to make it. That's also going to create a problem for them at their program because they enter the portal. So now the coaches are going to feel distrustful of them, and it's going to end their career there sometimes, right?
And therein lies the problem, Kurt.
Right.
Yeah. If that kid can help you win, and he's not the world's best kid and not the world's best teammate, it doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
You know, people are trying to win so they can get the next job and or keep their job. I mean, look at Coach Kelly. Coach Kelly now at LSU was the winningest coach in the history of Notre Dame. He passed Newt freaking Rockne. And he left. Do you know why he left? Because LSU paid him about $3 or $4 million more. Right. I mean, this is insanity what's going on right now. Coach Riley, I don't know if the money is the big disparity there or the fact that he wanted to live in LA. I'm not going to I don't know anything about that. I don't know anything about him.
Right.
But what you are seeing created by this money, these college coaches, in many cases at the highest of levels, it's not so much about building and managing a roster for 3, 4, 5 years to build to something. It's win right now, or else, just like Ed Orgeron wins the national title with Joe Burrow. It would have been now just about 2 years ago?
Yeah, 2 years ago.
He is no longer the head coach of LSU. Let that sink in.
It's crazy.
There is no more development, and it's not the fault of the coaches. It's not the fault of the players. I am going to lay all the fault at one group of people, the presidents and the universities chancellors running these places.
Yeah.
If this was about development, they would stop firing these coaches.
Yeah,
now, listen,
give them a chance. Yeah.
If you leave, I think that's another discussion. In my opinion, if we could get these presidents and university chancellors to calm their firing down, because it's all coming from the boosters. The boosters are screaming and yelling at these, chancellors that they want to win, or I'm not going to give you $20 million for your library. Because for these big time boosters, these people that own these massive companies, that pride for some reason is so important. They'll just dump money into their universities and find a way to have their football teams be good so they can be on TV. Yeah. So if we could ever get away, and all the same thing, comes down to money. If we could get these presidents and university chancellors to calm their firing down, and I do think we have to do something about the coaches moving at will. If they're at the end of their contract and you don't renew it, I think that's what we got to be accepting of. But, for Jimbo Fisher to up and leave Florida State a couple of years ago after winning the national title and go to Texas A&M before their bowl game, I'm concerned about how do you then blame a kid for doing the exact same thing?
It creates an environment of just complete disloyalty. And why do they even call them contracts when these guys can leave at will anyway?
Well, they've got buyouts, but they all make so much money, and the next school will pay their buyout. It all comes down to one fundamental thing. So what it kind of gets to, Kirk, and I know this may be a super long story, but if you love the game, and love is a terrible word. I shouldn't use that. I just did a blog about why you should.
I read that.
When it comes to sports.
I read that. It was good. Yeah.
Anyway, so if you really believe in the game, you got to focus on small college. If you're a believer that the game is pure and I want to teach my kids something from it, go watch Wheaton, College play. Go watch North Park. Go watch Hope College. Go watch Saginaw Valley. Because still at those levels, though, it's not as much win right now. It's not win right now where you're. I was with Coach Collins for 8 years. He was there for over 10, and we had some rough years.
Yeah.
And again, they wanted us to win. I'm not making any bones about that, but it was not like when this many you're fired. It was, hey, we got to get better. We got to get better. If it would have went 5, 6, 7 years of losing, okay, understandable. That's part of life. But we're playing this really weird, gamble and gray line of how things are working, and then we're filtering it down to these younger levels, and it's just not like that. If Texas A&M and Texas and Michigan want to operate like that, fine, have at it. In my opinion, I really think the Power Fives need to break away and have their own conference. Just do whatever you want. Have it be the Wild West. If you want to pay the players, so
NFL Part 2.
See. Yeah. Yes, but okay. Well, therein lies. Okay, and I know I'm going down this rabbit. You got me going on a rant. Bro.
I love it though.
So here's the problem: the NFL is really probably one of the main contributors of this issue as well, because they have a free minor league system. So someone says, well, why don't we just create minor leagues? Why would the NFL have anything to do with that? Why does the AAFL and the USFL, which is about to launch, it won't make it? The XFL, why do they always fail? Because the NFL is not going to step in and help you.
No, they're getting it for free.
No interest. Yeah. They're getting it for free from Alabama and Michigan. So why on earth would they go to the Major League Baseball model and start subsidizing and giving away millions of dollars when they can get it for free? So it all comes back to the root of this fundamental issue that we have created in primarily football, which is like I told a buddy of mine today. No one talks about this in wrestling or baseball. Well, maybe in baseball, but nobody talks about this in wrestling or volleyball. Nobody talks about this.
It's still more
swimming.
purely about the sport there. Yeah.
And why? Because there's not the massive amount of money involved. Some booster is not going to go to the University of Wisconsin crew club and say, I want the national championship crew team, and I'll give you $5 million to do it. First of all, they do win a lot of titles at Wisconsin crew, but it's the money that is filtered into from NFL down to colleges and the pressure that the people at the top are feeling. And my biggest statement on social media, has been we need a college football commissioner to get this thing in line. It is a hot mess right now, but same old, same old. Why would Kevin Warren, why would Jim Sankey, why would all these people give up all that power and give it to, like I've advocated for Marcellus Wiley. He's on, I think he's on Fox Sports. He went to Ivy League school. He went to Columbia.
Played in the NFL.
Played at the highest. Played in the NFL. He understands what all this is truly about regarding the game. And I put on social media, give the guy $10 million, put him in charge. He answers to nobody, but he still has to take in the advice of commissioners and what's best for Big Ten versus SEC. But people refuse to give away power. I get it. If you've got $1 million in your hand, why hand it over? Like, listen, I'm not a dummy. I understand how all this works. But the problem, no singular leadership and just the money being thrown around and the way these university presidents and chancellors have so much pressure to hire and fire them by their boosters because of money is creating such a dynamic that we'll never get our hands around. It's been going on for a long time.
This brings up a big question though. So you've kind of become, I'm not going to use this word. I'm going to say the word woke but it's kind of an annoying word, but basically you've kind of seen you've seen behind the curtain now of a system that's changed and you're dissatisfied with it clearly. Right. Which is cool. How does that not trickle down into your recruitment? Like how do you are you just upfront with the kids about a lot of these things?
I listen. I talk to them about what's the current state. If I had multiple kids that are in college now because I've gone a couple cycles now. Some kids are in college and that's got to
feel cool. By the way, you must feel some pride about that.
I have very little to do with that. That's the biggest thing that happens is people then take ownership into this, said player at USC, I got him there, or said player at Grand Valley. Those kids got themselves there. I maybe did 2% to make sure that you at least didn't get screwed out of $1,000 here or $2,000 there, or your family didn't take the trip down to Tallahassee to go to the Florida State camp because you were going to end up at Grand Valley anyways.
Right.
Those are the things that I do. But see, here's the deal. I'm frustrated, but I'm going to get in and live in the current climate. And it's going to take 10, 12 years for this thing to kind of correct itself, if it ever will. So people call me and they're like, hey, I'm thinking about transferring. I don't tell them no. I say, let's talk about it. Let's talk about the pros and the cons. And if we get to the point where that's the best option for you in today's current climate, I'll advise you to do that. So you can't sit here and say, I don't even really know what woke means, but I'm not dissatisfied. I didn't leave because of this.
No, right.
College football isn't like some awful, horrible. I mean, listen, I wish on earth this were the worst thing happening. I mean, I lived through a tragedy almost less than 2 months ago. I wish this were the worst thing on earth. I really pray every day that college football's issues were the worst thing that happened out there on a daily basis. They're not. But my point is, I'm going to live in the current climate and make sure kids understand the facts, families understand the facts, high school coaches understand the facts. But that doesn't mean I have to like it. And that was kind of something that I learned coaching. Like there were certain things I wanted to do as an offensive coordinator that I just believed in, but they weren't going to work. We didn't either have the quarterback, or we didn't have the offensive line, or we didn't have the linebackers, or I didn't have any control over the defense, but maybe we didn't have the defense to do these things that, you can sit here and complain about it, or you can just keep working, and that's, again, it falls back to the same fundamental thing. So I'm not dissatisfied. I am generally concerned about the future of the game from the full standpoint. I'm not a Division I guy. Yeah. Well, big picture, yes. And I'm not I never spent a day in FBS football. I don't know anything about being in, those meetings at Pittsburgh or Miami or anything. Highest level I got to was North Dakota State. We went 3-9 one year, and next year we snuck into the playoffs, and now they win all the time when they got rid of me.
Hey, hold on, Dan. Didn't North Dakota State just win the FCS?
They've won 9 of 10 since I left. See, the problem was they kicked me to the curb. They got the dead weight out of there, and they had barely lost any game since. They've only lost, I think, 5 games since I left. That was 10 years ago.
You were a real anchor for them, I guess.
But here's the deal. I was the anchor. But what I learned in that, see, people now, no one talks about North Dakota State going 3-9. That's all I ever talk about. I am not interested in their national titles because it all started from the leadership by Craig Bohl, Brent Vegan, and the staff that was there that said, okay, we're 3-9. How are we going to get this thing to the point where we're winning national titles? Because that was our goal. North Dakota State had won a ton of Division II national titles. Yeah. They transitioned up, and they were pretty good during the transition phase. And then when they became eligible for the playoffs, we started struggling. Again, maybe it was me. I don't know. Maybe it was a lot of factors. But we sat in meetings, and Craig Bohl, who I think is the premier coach in college football, I don't care what anybody tells me. Don't talk to me about Nick Saban. Talk to me about the guys who do more with less. That's what I believe. Yeah. Craig Bohl sat in meetings and said, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it, and we're not going to deviate. And along that path, there's always pitfalls, but then there's also ropes to grab to move up. Yeah. And you have to have strong leadership to stay on the path to avoid the pitfalls and to grab the ropes so that you can kind of move up. Yeah. Craig Bohl was like that for me. One of his assistants, A.J. Cooper, was now Washington State with another one of his assistants, the head coach there, Jacob Dicker. They're the same way, at least as far as I know. Tim Polasek, his offensive coordinator at Wyoming, is the same way as far as I know. Scotty Hazelton, who's at Michigan State as a defensive coordinator, is the same way as far as I know. Brent Vegan took Montana State to the national title. They got pummeled by North Dakota State, but that's how Brent was the way. So my point is, there's hope for me that this thing is not like the end of the world. Like, oh my God, college football. No, college football is not so bad. I know a lot of people that I know are doing it right and are awesome.
Right.
But the reality is we tend to focus on the 2%. We tend to focus on the issues, or if you watch ESPN, it's always, this guy got arrested for assaulting his wife. And, this coach has got, the guy down at Ole Miss, Hugh Freeze gets in trouble for all his improprieties. And we focus on that instead of focusing on, oh my God, Craig Bohl is an unbelievable football coach.
Yeah, right.
Or whatever the story, whoever there are. It's not just him. This guy down at Wake Forest, what he's doing. Like, why don't we focus on that more? It's because it's not clickbait in this day and age.
Exactly. Yeah, it comes down to that 100%. But I don't know anything about this particular person, like personally, but I feel like PJ Fleck's got to be that kind of guy too.
Again, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, he at least has an air about him that makes it seems authentic or something. I don't know.
Well, here's the thing that I always say. I generally am very cautious of the big loud talker, just like me. I'm a big loud talker. It's why it's going to take me 10 years to get this company where it's going. At least Coach Fleck has created some stability. I mean, Western Michigan, his first year, won one game, and then they turned around and won the MAC, and then he did take the Minnesota job. He's a big loud talker, but that's the world we live in. And here's the thing, and I always used to say this in recruiting. I can't coach them unless I get them. You have to be able to get these kids in recruiting. With coaches, it's the same. You do have to talk your way into jobs.
Right.
Coach Kill, who was a Saginaw Valley coach, was there before Coach Fleck.
Yeah.
And, his tenure kind of ended awkwardly, and he's back in coaching now. He's the head coach down in New Mexico State. And he was the polar opposite from Coach Fleck. And Coach Fleck's a big, loud talker. Coach Kill, all he'd ever done is won. So for me, it's less about what you do and what you say and how you are, is about how you truly run your program. What do your alums say about you? How are you at alumni events?
Right.
How are you to your former players? I guess they be alums too. What do your former players say about you? And those are the types of messages that you generally just don't hear, because those are kind of private, intimate conversations. So for me, when I think of coaches, I was with Chuck Martin at Grand Valley in 2006 and 2007. Coach Martin's now the head coach at Miami of Ohio, and they won the MAC a couple of years ago. Miami of Ohio is traditionally not one of the premier teams. Coach Martin coached his players, all our players, harder than anybody I've ever seen in my life. And it was every single day you are showing up, and you better have your mind right and prepared, because it is a battle to both beat the man across from you and survive the wrath of Coach Martin.
Right.
Okay. Now, there always are some challenges. Coach Ori wasn't that way.
No.
And some coaches are different. But my point is, there's always challenges, and time always adjusts. And from what I understand, he even has told me many years ago that he's much different now. You have to adapt and you have to change. But see, people see so much and they make too many impressions, and you don't actually get to know the person. Now, this was way back before social media, and even 2006, 2007, it was early in the stages where he would have been on film all the time. So he was super aggressive coaching his players, and he's changed a lot now because he's so much more out there. But the reality is, I tend not to take coaches at their face value. And this is a big part of my recruiting process. You have to get to know these people. You have to spend time. You have to see through the minutia, because any hot shot, flash in the pan coach can walk in, wow you, and
impress you.
Coach.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So, I mean, the thing is, that's what I talk to families a lot about. And that's another one of the issues I have with college football is we're now hiring all these flashy talkers. I don't know this guy going to Oregon at all. I'm sure he's the most amazing coach on earth, but he's 35. What kind of experience can that guy have that they're going to be prepared to go through some of the pitfalls. I don't know. He might be that good. I think we've got to find this better middle ground where there was this really big rush about 10 years ago to start hiring all these young kids. Lane Kiffin was, I think, 33 or 34 when the Raiders hired him. Didn't work out very good. And then this big rush kept going. Young, energetic guys that can just talk and wow these kids. And I think that's led to where college football is where it is today. Yeah. Yes, Wyoming has players that transfer, but I think when you look at Wyoming from a longevity standpoint, that's why they're better, because they have somebody like a Coach Bull who's more consistent. And again, you can't coach forever. Coach Saban can't coach forever. So you at some point have to get new blood in there. But the point is, I think we've got to find this better middle ground with coaching where it's not just hire the hot, flashy young coach that has a flashy agent also, by the way. That's a whole other topic. You don't want to get me started on that. But you hire these young guys that are just big talkers. And then it's like when they don't work out, you just fire them and get the next guy in, and he's now prepared for the next job. And I'm like, I just don't always quite understand that, So I think we've got to find a better way to really kind of, I don't know if handicap's the right word, but, kind of filter out the people that are being put into these positions. It shouldn't be run by search firms, and it sure as hell should not be run by agents. And right now that's a big part of how we're finding coaches at the major level. Now,
on the topic of young coaches, how cool is it to see Matt LaFleur doing so well at Green Bay? That's not a huge surprise, I'm not surprised. And I don't tell a lot of people in Wisconsin, because it doesn't matter. So by the way, just for some context, Matt was our quarterback when we were there. And he was a very good player from Mount Pleasant, worked hard, and then now he's worked his way up the ranks, and he's the head coach at the Packers now.
Yeah, and I think the thing about it is what Matt has done is he's the exact same person he is today as he was back then. Now, I'm sure behind closed doors, everyone changes a little bit and grows and adapts and learns their philosophy. But I'll give you a quick story. So when I was at Northern Michigan, we stopped to Lambeau Field after doing a camp down here in Wisconsin.
What was Matt coaching with you at that time?
Matt was the head coach at Green Bay.
So this is at Green Bay. Okay.
This was his first year. This was going into his first year. I think it was going into his first year. So it would have been summer of 19, my only year there. Yeah. So we go down to have a camp. On the way back, we're driving past Green Bay, and I just shoot him a text. Matt is understandably, every once in a while he'll respond. I would never actually even expect him. The guy's unbelievably busy. He responds, and I'm like, hey, Matt, we're coming through Green Bay. We're going to stop at the atrium thing, or whatever. They have their pro club there. And he says, well, text me when you're here. I'll come down and I'll show you guys around Lambeau. The guy shows us around the facility for like 2 hours. Yeah. And I text all the guys that I played with, again, a couple guys that were older than you. And I said, he's the exact same guy he was when he was a player. Now, there's pros and cons to that. Matt, he'll probably say the same about me. Matt was a pain as far as he was kind of one of those little whiners. But the reality is he could win. He was competitive. And no one's perfect, bro. I mean, there ain't no perfect soul on this earth. Everyone's got pros and cons. Yeah. Matt was competitive. He was a dynamic player. He'd find a way for us to win every week for the most part. But listen, he was a little bit of a whiner and a complainer. Me and him would yell at each other all the time. But I said he's the exact same guy. He treated us like we were the most important people on earth. He referenced Buck Nystrom when we were there. Buck is since passed, unfortunately, this past football season. Very famous coach. Matt worked with him. It would have been probably 10 years ago. And he asked us how Buck was doing. He sat there and talked to Bobby Jerson like they were best friends. And we all left because that was a new staff for me too. And the staff was like, man, that guy's pretty cool. Is he always like that? I'm like, that's exactly how I was in college.
Yeah.
Cool. On the field, he's a little bit different. But so that's my point is, now there's a young guy. They hired him. I mean, Matt's 2 years older than me. So that's 3 years ago. So he was 36 or so when they hired him. And that's a great fit because they did their work. And if you ever listen to that press conference, Mark Murphy and those people talked about how they vetted what kind of a person he was.
That's all they talked about. How much they got a good vibe from him. They liked it. He was just they could tell he's a good dude. So that makes me happy too.
Now listen, he's got maybe one of the top 3 quarterbacks of all time to play for. So you're going to win. I'm not taking anything away from him.
As my mother would say, he's quite the looker, though, too. Come on, that doesn't hurt. They've got some funny shirts around here, Kirk. If you go to the different stores, they say it's a shirt that says "Our coach is hotter than yours," and I'm always like, "My goodness, that's where have we gotten to?" But again, unless Mark Murphy was completely lying, they talked about what kind of person he was, and he had paid his dues. Of course, he wasn't successful that year before he showed up to Green Bay. At Tennessee, they didn't even make the playoffs. Their offense was Right. And Matt had only had 1 year as a true play caller because he left Sean McVay's staff and he was, I think, the quarterback coach and then went to go be an OC. So it's not always about flashy and who's just winning. They went and found the right guy, the right fit, and we don't focus on that enough. And at the time, people like Colin Cowherd crushed him, and this guy's a terrible hire, and they're only hiring him because he's young. And I'm like,
Well, maybe so, but they hopefully they did their work. And to me, in my opinion,
It looks like they did.
And I'm not trying. Well, I mean, how good a work did the Raiders do on John Gruden? There's another flashy big talker that talked his way back into a big contract. And he's obviously not a great person. Same thing with Urban Meyer. I've done some blogs on Urban Meyer. I'm discouraged by the stories you hear about Urban Meyer. Those are not people that should be running, programs with young men. In my opinion, he can do whatever he wants. And he's obviously knows how to coach football. But and I wrote in my blog, my son will never play for him. Now, again, that he'd probably be retired by the time, one way or another, by the time Ben's that age. And Ben, who knows if he'll even be that caliber of a player. But I would never send my son to play for a guy like that. And I would do my work to try to find that stuff out. Because that was not that hard to figure out. I knew some of those stories. And here I'm going to sound like that guy. Oh, it's easy to say now. But reality is it was not that hard to hear some of those stories that he was a little bit on the edge.
Yeah, I've been hearing it for a while. Too.
But nobody cares about it. They can come in and win.
Get the
and
W.
If you win, nobody cares. If he would have won that game where he went back to his bar, no one would have cared. But the problem was he lost. There's all this chance to pile on, and the guy made a mistake. And I'm not saying he should be crucified. Again, I wish these were the biggest issues on earth. I pray every night that this would be the biggest thing, the scariest thing we'd all have to face. But to me, I just think coaching is such a big part of it. We've really kind of screwed the pooch a little bit on how we're hiring coaches. And I think there's some young good ones that should be driven up. I always say this. I have a guy that I work with here in Waukesha on another job I do. I work 3 jobs. I've said that on a couple podcasts before. He's a diehard Lions fan like me. And the reality is they never should have fired Jim Caldwell.
Right.
Because some young hotshot GM who has no idea what he's doing thinks he knows better than Jim Caldwell. They fire him. The Lions have been terrible ever since.
Yeah, the dude makes the dude makes the playoffs 3 out of 5 years, and it wasn't good enough.
Therein lies the problem. And therein lies the problem. We're listening to the wrong people, and we're not valuing again the game. And again, the NFL is different. I shook Jim Caldwell's hand one day. I was down at the Senior Bowl watching Jeff Janis. He seemed like a really nice. I shook his hand and he said something to me like he knew who I was. It's because I had the Saginaw Valley logo. He said something, hey, your boy's doing pretty good.
That's cool. Yeah.
Wow. That's good insight. That's a smart guy. But again, I'm not surprised they won just from that one simple interaction. But we don't value that anymore in football, and it really bothers me.
So I have an exercise for you, Dan. My name is Kirk Ross. I'm 37 years old. I've still got 3 years of eligibility left at the college level. I'm about 6'3", 250 pounds. I haven't bench pressed in probably 4 years, and I probably run about a 5'6" at this point. Maybe. Give me some advice. I come to you. Hey, listen, man, I'm interested in going to a university. What do you got for me, Dan?
Why? My first thing is why?
For the chicks, man.
Okay, for the chicks. Here's the deal. You go and you walk on at Florida State, and they've got all sorts of beaches down there. I mean, those are the things I have to return families and prospects questions with a question.
Yeah. Because
as I learned, this was the number one thing that came up when I was coaching and during recruiting, is they would always say to me, well, we didn't have any idea what questions to ask. Because you got to remember now, if you've never gone through it, you don't know what to do. I went through it every year for 15 years.
Right.
So I'd sit there and look at these people like, geez, how do you not know what to ask? And my wife would tell me all the time, like, they don't know. They've never been through it. Every once in a while, we would get a family who had an older son or daughter that went through, so they had an idea. But even that uniqueness is different.
Yeah,
so my thing to you, Kirk, would be why? Why would you want to do this? Why do you? And I will not advise a kid on anything until I can fundamentally get to what I feel is their why. Do you just want to play? Okay. Well, if you just want to play, Hope College is offering you an opportunity. Don't cry because it's not Michigan. Hey, I want to go to the NFL. Okay. Hope College is probably not going to provide you that opportunity. Here's how you would possibly get to Michigan. You have to just get into school. You have to go beg for a walk-on trial.
Get in the weight room for 3 years.
Yes. Yeah. And you still may not get on. And then you have to do that every year for the next 3 years and pray that you can get an opportunity in your senior year. But people don't know how to start that process without asking a question. And then I turn around and come back to why. Why do you want to play? So many kids, I've had it happen on a meeting with a family. It looks cool. It looks like it'd be fun. And I'm like, skirt, dude, hold on.
It's not that fun.
It's not fun. No. You show up at 6 a.m. and you don't leave until 11. You remember those days, Kirk. How tired were you during camp?
Man,
you show up. It's 12 straight hours of football meetings, which are generally worse. Yes. I mean, this is all of us in meetings, right? Oh, we're half asleep. The coach is just, we got to get to the A gap and the B gap, and you got to fill it. We're just like, cash, I do. When do I get to play? But the problem is kids don't see that, and they don't really understand the process. So my question to you, that's how I always start it. once I can get to that why, and I talk about, your why are you doing this? And again, if it's to get to the NFL, I'm fine with that. That gives me a direction. I can work with that. Right. I can't work with the old, well, I don't know, I just want to give it a shot. I'm always like, oh God, I can't. I'd rather have a kid say he wants to play in the NFL. I at least have a choice.
Yeah, then he gives you some guidance as to what programs to look at and all that, if it's even in the.
But again, they don't know what they don't know, so I definitely don't fault them. So again, I get that question a lot, actually. Because the number one thing I didn't focus on was your height, weight, and your speed, and how many times you bench. I could care less about that yet. We'll worry about that 3 months.
Right.
And that's where it gets really difficult. I talk to people sometimes for every single day for months. And it's just like after 3 months, they're like, wow, it makes sense now. And I'm like, yeah, that took us 3 months of everyday conversation to get it. And you think you're just going to watch something on social media and then find your way at Alabama. Like, bro, don't work like that.
What's a good example of a success story? You don't need to share the name if you don't want, but like give me an example of an athlete that you came across. It doesn't even have to be in football, by the way, because I know you're representing kids elsewhere, but
my first year, the first school I ever represented. Okay. I'm not going to say their name, but they're in Michigan, and the coach, who a phenomenal human being. He reached out to me about what I do, and hey, this is kind of what I'm looking for. And so we started working together. One of his first players was choosing between a Division II school and Division III school. And ultimately he felt better at the Division III school anyway. So that's where he went. And I messaged him this off season and, in between the semester, and said, hey, how's it going? Hey, going really well. I had a great first semester, and I can't wait for next year. And in my mind, I'm thinking, like, because what you see on TV all day, right? He's going to say, like, well, I don't know. I'm thinking about transferring. He never said that once.
Right.
He was like, dude, like, this is awesome. I cannot wait for the off-season training that comes up, and I'm going to attack it next year. That's awesome. Never once talked to him about, like, motivation. It was just him. And, like, to me, that's a success story, because we did the work on the front end. That kid's ready to roll. Yeah. And again, that's not how it has to work out. Again, I talked to a couple of kids about the transfer portal process that were AREN, parts of the AREN family, but I think when you just kind of look at that, the other thing I look back at, and I get a message once a year from a kid that I coached, and he talks about something that I reference to him and he does now to the youth kids.
That's awesome.
And like, there was a day this past winter, I don't know, I guess it would have been probably early November. And just out of the blue, he messaged me and said, he says it every year, but I forget, I'm not very smart. He messaged me the same message, just about something he does with his players, and just he thanked me for it. And I was just brightened up my week, and those are the things that, again, coaches do have that you just don't see on ESPN. They're not going to cover that stuff. So again, I'm not anti-coach, but I just do think we're in a unique place, because those messages, a lot of them have them from the Nick Sabans on down, have those same stories too.
Yeah.
And those are the successes. Those are the successes that I think any coach would say, and I have those too. But thinking about that kid, the first thing I thought was, man, he didn't say one thing about leaving. He didn't say one thing about how difficult it was. He just said, I cannot wait for the next off-season conditioning. I was like, that's good. That's what we want. So that's a success story.
So I imagine that, with your background in strength and conditioning, I mean, you put in a ton of work as a student, and then of course you helped out Coach Ellery as a strength and conditioning guy. Does that come into your recruitment process? Like, are you actually working with these kids to improve their combine numbers and stuff like that? Or is it more
very, very little, because that has changed a lot, as it's funny you say that, because right about the time I got into coaching, strength conditioning really exploded amongst programs as well too. At the time I was thinking about going into that realm, and you'd even look at some of the big programs and they'd have like 2 or 3 assistants for like football. Now they've got like 8. Yeah. And even Saginaw Valley, Coach Winter, Chris Winters, the staff over there does a really nice job. I mean, it was just Coach Evans and Coach Carter and Coach Adams running it for us. We're just our O-line coaches, things have just changed. So I really do kind of leave that to them. Anybody, whether you work at your own program, at your own high school, and just do that lifting, if you do get specialized training, I just talk to them about the pros and cons of it. And I do always emphasize, and if anybody from my AREN families ever listens, they'll probably laugh. I talk about flexibility so much, because that's so key to the process.
You were always you were flexible. I remember. For me, compared to me.
Right. Well, that might be whatever ability I had, is because I was able to kind of bend and dip the edge and rush and all those things. And those are things you have to remember. But that is one thing you can increase. It's hard to get taller, Kirk. It's hard for, I have some quarterbacks in these schools, and the coach calls me and says, he's 5'11", and he's just not getting any calls. And I'm like, Coach, we can't make him taller. It's time to accept the fact that he might have to choose, a D3 or a D2. And like, Wisconsin probably isn't going to call because he's 5'11". That's life. Right. Life hands you, everybody different things. So I kind of stay away from the actual specifics of the training.
Yeah, you're just talking through the process.
Hey, this is important. Yeah.
Well,
not my area of expertise anymore.
I think it's super cool what you're doing. I hope I'm sure it's going to continue to do well. So are you going to kind of start to focus more on it, like representing full programs? That's kind of what your direction is.
I was just talking to a coach today. I said, I feel like I can make my biggest impact with helping schools.
Because then the coaches learn from you. The coach will, you can move on to someday and the coach will know still. It's like,
yes. And that's really, and this is going to kind of sound stupid, but really kind of the intention is almost put myself out of a job, if you know what I mean. Like I want to teach these coaches so well that in 3 or 4 years they say, hey, Dan, this has been fantastic, but I don't know if we need your services anymore. And hopefully I've picked up some other schools and kind of like a snowball impact where after a while they can move on from having to pay for this kind of advice and they know it. But the recruiting process is so dynamic. Like I'm starting to even think about this new constitution that's going to come out, and like these high school coaches are going to be like, new constitution, like the NCAA is going to drastically change in a couple months here. Right. So like they need help and they do not need to get lost in the process. So I help select individual families. I've got a couple great ones in Michigan that I work with, and they're kind of like connected, like they're family friends or alums from Saginaw Valley that I knew, or there's some kind of a connection. But it's really hard to represent an individual family, in my opinion, because then you start getting into it is kind of outcome based. So the more kids, like if I run a business and I'm about representing individual people, I kind of need to start getting some kids to Michigan, and I kind of might finagle some things to make it work out so my business can be productive.
Yeah, you become conflicted.
I'm not about that.
Yeah, you become conflicted completely. Yeah.
It's a conflict of interest in my opinion. So I'm always very upfront with the families, and I'm like, listen, exposure is not where I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you through the ups and downs. I'm going to give you like some tips to do as far as how to communicate with coaches. And that just lends me to be better with the coaching staffs. And again, it's kind of like I was telling a friend of mine, and I was like, it's kind of like I'm still part of the staff. That's how I can coach. Yeah. I can't get back out and move around 10 times anymore. I don't have that in me anymore. Yeah. But I can be a part of a high school staff just by focusing on their recruiting. And I can do it nationally now because of the digital stuff we can do. I mean, I have Zoom meetings with schools out in Pennsylvania, and I represent schools in Michigan, and I try to get out there a couple times a year, but I talk to those families every week. Yeah. And send them videos every week because of the technology component, how we can reach people. So like I said, it's just being able to touch an entire program and kind of start from the bottom, even incoming freshmen even, and get that messaging going up to seniors. I've seen a lot of benefit and I enjoy it a lot. Like the families would probably say like the guy talks as much on those consultations as he does on this podcast. So I'll never stop talking if they don't like, coach, I got stuff to do. I'm like, all right, sorry, we'll talk tomorrow. And that's just kind of how it is. So my direction with AREN is to really kind of tie in with programs that feel like they want help. Right. And then guide them through their unique process, because every school is different. Some schools are in heavily populated areas. They don't need any help with exposure. I have one here in Wisconsin. Every school in the Midwest comes through. Right. But if I'm out in like the thumb, I get as much traction. So you may need some exposure help. So every program is different. And it's really been enjoyable helping these high school coaches because they care about their kids more than anybody outside of their own families, the prospects' families. The high school coach does care, and that's in football, basketball, wrestling. It does not matter. Right. But the world is telling you to bypass that coach, and I'm not comfortable with that messaging right now.
Yeah, dude. Well, keep doing. You're leading by example, and I think it's really dope. It's interesting that you're such a talker, because you did have a nickname that was the Silent Assassin at one point when I was there.
Yeah, I was at, you remember, I don't know if you remember Nick Post, me a little bit older.
Of course. Yeah, he's still at Grand Valley. He's still at Grand Valley,
right? He's still at Grand Valley. He's a defensive, co-defensive coordinator at Grand Valley. Obviously a friend of mine. I was at his wedding this year, and I had to remind everybody my nickname in college was Fun Dan. So, it's like, hey, you got to keep talking, and you got to kind of enjoy the process a little bit. But man, this has been fun. You got a nice setup here, and you do a much more professional job than I do. You got nice lead-in music and everything. Now I'll be taking some notes, okay?
Yeah, dude, I'll help you out anytime. I'll do it for free. And if you're ever coming through Grand Rapids, swing through. I'll show you the attic in person. Be dope.
Fired up.
Dan, good luck, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks. This was awesome.
All right. Peace. All right, that's going to do it, folks. I hope you appreciated the passion that Dan speaks with. It's great to catch up to an old friend and to see when people, like I said during the episode, it's great to see when people find an issue and then work to resolve it rather than complain about it. So follow in Dan's footsteps. The Silent Assassin, the Big Talker, Fun Dan, whatever you want to call him. Thanks a lot, Dan. Thanks for coming on. Now I'm going to play a song for you that I produced a couple weeks ago. It's called Cardinals. It has a little bit to do with my time at Saginaw Valley. It's just an instrumental, so you don't have to hear my voice anymore. Thank God. All right, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Peace out.